finally decided to get a second chest freezer. I got a new one just recently, but that was before I decided to raw feed my dog and before I saw how much produce came out of that little garden patch that I have out in the backyard. And so since then I've been really struggling with how full that freezer is and that there is nothing really that I can fit in there. And also a problem is that the dog is currently doing an elimination diet, so I have one freezer full of food that he used to eat that I am waiting to reintroduce, and there is no freezer space. So I decided to get rid of my old freezer, which is a stand-up freezer, because the door shields were falling off and the seal is pretty dodgy and it just doesn't have enough space, and I'll probably give that to my best friend. And I got a new chest freezer which just arrived behind me. It's not a huge one because I didn't want to spend a fortune, and also I was kind of feeling ridiculous that as a one-person household I was already onto my second chest freezer, even if they're on the smaller side. So my first chest freezer is 200 liters and this one is 319. And so today I'm going to take out the old freezer, get the new one plugged in once it's sat for a little while, and I'm going to get to cooking, because what started this whole thing was that I wanted to be able to cook a month's worth of food and then just put it in the freezer and go and get what I needed each day. Because I don't know if any of you guys are cooking at home for one. It's the worst, because you either waste a lot of food and it goes off in the fridge, or you end up eating the same thing for 600 meals in a row and it's just, you learn to hate everything, or you end up buying takeout a lot because you just don't feel like having curry one more time. So that really worked well for me the first time I tried it, but since then the freezer is a lot fuller of the puppy dog stuff, and so I just needed a new freezer. So today's the day. I'm going to hit the shops now and get some supplies to start cooking. The other thing I'm going to be able to do now, I actually have some freezer space, is I've got some large bags of rice that I want to freeze for a few days, then let thaw, then put in Mylar bags, just for some food security and for my extended pantry. And I would like to put those in the freezer first thing, but it needs to sit for a little while, and then once it has had a few hours to just settle, then I'll unplug the old one, wiggle it out of the spot, and put the new one in. I've also got to do a garden harvest. I've just got back from Sydney and I've been in and out of hospital and life. But there's not actually that much to harvest. I've already snapped off some of the cauliflowers that were starting to separate, but there's one big beautiful one out there and I am so proud. Anytime I've grown cauliflower before, as soon as the little heads started to form, they've always got knocked off by local bush rats. I've got a full-on big head of cauliflower out there that looks perfect, beautiful, and I'm so excited. I do also have some plants that need to be removed and some potato blight and a dead tomato plant. But because it's winter, there's just nothing much happening, and anything that we did have a lot of produce on, like beans and things like that, have just been annihilated by the stupid amounts of rain we've had. So the only thing that seemed to like it is the cauliflower. So today I'm going to harvest the cauliflower and cook it up and cook up a bunch of other things, and then I've got to do my tax. And if we have time, I will take you through the garden and we might rip a few things out and maybe plant some garlic that has been sitting in my living room waiting to be planted for weeks. I'm always nervous to turn on freezers. I don't know what happens if you don't leave them for long enough, but it hasn't been flat. It just came straight out of the truck and into here, and it's probably been sitting still until I just moved it for about 2 hours. So it should be right to turn on, but what I'm actually going to do is empty out this original chest freezer as well, because it has a lot of mix of things for me and for Rafa, and it just needs to be reorganized. And ideally I'd like to put most of the dog meat in the smaller one and put all the stuff for me in the bigger one, because then it's just easier to find what you're looking for if it's not spread across 2 freezers. There is a stupid amount of meat for the dog, and a lot of it had got buried at the bottom of the freezer, and some stuff that I had been looking for and been unable to find, like a zucchini, what do they call when they're with the egg? Zucchini loaf type thing, and a lemongrass curry, which I really love, which is chickpeas and sweet potato, and obviously lemongrass. But now I've got to get all this back in the freezer and get the other one turned off because it's probably been sitting now for about 3 hours. So much meat for the dog. I don't know what I'm going to do if he turns out to be hypersensitive to chicken or beef, because I'm in trouble if that's the case, because I have rather a lot of chicken and beef. So this is all what was in this freezer before I unpacked it, and the other standing freezer that I'm getting rid of, and it's all fitting with like 1/3 of the freezer space left to go, which is very exciting that it kind of fit into that kind of space and has given me more room in the freezer, but also it's a ridiculous amount of meat. This is going to be awesome. There is now plenty of space for me to add things, and I can pull even stuff out of the fridge and freeze it, and I've got plenty of space to make things over the next couple of days and add them in so that I don't have to cook for the next month. I found a few things I want to defrost for coming meals that I'd forgotten about. So this is a lemongrass sweet potato curry. These are lemon and cashew, what are they called? Protein balls. This is very questionable. I think it was supposed to be maybe chicken broth, but it looks just like tallow. Chicken teriyaki. And this is a zucchini bake. I forget what those egg things are called. I busted Reffy out here digging this morning. I think he might have flattened some of the potatoes. They were already having a hard time, but I really need to get out here and deal with these. There does seem to be a little bit of blight spreading, but I haven't had time to deal with that today, so hopefully tomorrow. My little lettuces are coming along nicely. But the broccoli, this is like the best of it, has been fairly mauled. I really need to get out here and actually do something about this. I'm actually going to spray a neem oil on most things, because neem also detracts from ticks, and I recently got sent to hospital with a tick bite, so I'm pretty keen to minimize the ticks. I still don't know where I got the tick bite. So right now there really isn't much to harvest. I've just had a bit of a look around and everything looks like it's suffering with the amount of rain we've had. It looks like most of my onions have either died or not bulbed up. I think Rafa can take some of the blame for digging around that. The tomato plant that was producing looks like it has been taken down by the rain and a fungal disease. Although the little seedlings I planted have bloomed quite nicely and have grown quite a lot. The Swiss chard is doing really well, so the silver beet is doing really well, and I love the color on the pink stalks. I love that. I might grow it exclusively for just the visual interest. Again, if I'm not a particular fan of the actual silver beet flavor when it's colored. I've never had a colored silver beet before. I can't imagine it's that different to, you know, your regular everyday plain one. But they're doing really well, although a little bit kind of moth-eaten, for want of a better term. My celery is kind of just chugging along. It doesn't seem to really be thickening up, and I feel like lack of moisture can't be used as an excuse for the celery to not be doing its thing. Otherwise, it's quite happy and healthy. My flowers are doing pretty well, considering it's been a very cold and windy winter. But other than that, there's not a lot of food to harvest. So right now I'm going to get that one cauliflower that is looking amazing. And I'm going to go and get some herbs for tonight's dinner. I'm going to make a chicken I recently made, which is a Jamie Oliver recipe, where you stuff butter and rosemary, thyme, I used parsley, I used a bit of basil underneath the skin, and then I roasted it like that with a lemon stuffed up the inside with a little bit of rosemary. My rosemary grows really slow. I don't know if you guys have that problem. Even if I put it in like super bright light or medium light, it doesn't seem to really matter. It seems to grow really slow. A lot of my other friends seem to have no problem with theirs at all. I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but it's not working. Anyway, so I'm going to grab some herbs, what I've got. I bought some rosemary at the shops, and I'm going to grab that cauliflower, and we're going to get the harvest. Looks like there's nothing really left of my basil, and my rosemary still hasn't really grown, so oh well. Probably should have come out and got this yesterday. It is starting to separate a little bit. While they do their thing in the sink soaking and hopefully getting super clean, hopefully the dishwashing I did earlier will also be drying off. And so right now I'm going to take little Raffy for a walk, and then we'll get to making dinner and starting to make a month's worth of food. The other things I need to deal with on my kitchen table are these packs of organic sorghum flour that I ordered from what are they called? The Source bulk food. And it's a bit of a mixed bag ordering from them. I was trying to get some gluten-free flours at lower prices that I could store in Mylar bags for long-term use, but unfortunately the use by date on these is tomorrow. So I need to work out what I can do with these that I can freeze to preserve the flour, because I don't want to waste Mylar bags on flour that only had a 3 to 4 week expiry date. I also ordered about 3 kilos of black beans from them that were expired on arrival, which I mentioned to them, and they refunded immediately and said that they reckon the black beans would still be fine, but some of them in there were moldy, so I wasn't super thrilled about that. But something that I did order from the Source bulk food that I'm deeply in love with now is this acai berry powder and dried blueberries. I put these in chia pudding, and these are like the tastiest sultanas you have ever eaten. I did just buy dried blueberries from Costco that through the packet feel larger than these, so who knows if they're any good. Excuse the puppy destroying paper. The other thing we need to deal with is these have all been sitting on the kitchen table just adapting to life. So we've got some dried green kiwis. I actually prefer the dried gold kiwis. But then these are all my first attempts at dehydrating vegetables. We've got carrots, onions, broccoli, there are green beans, and they've all been sitting for over a week on the table. So I'm going to be using Kilner jars. They're the first canning jars I've ever used. It's the first time I've ever canned anything, first time I've dehydrated anything, and I'm going to vacuum seal them and store these away in my pantry. And I'm going to leave some out just to experiment with, because I don't know how these turn out. I've never made them before, and I'm going to make a minestrone later, and I'm going to keep some aside and use the green beans in the minestrone and just see how that turns out. But I'm going to start putting these away, and it'll be an interesting experience because it's my first canning experience. And then I've got loads of citrus. So these, some of them came from my house, some from my parents' house. Sorry, we've just had a delivery. That's the pumpkin from the garden, the one and only that need to be dealt with. And I still have another whole bucket of oranges, limes, and lemons. So we're going to make some dehydrated citrus wheels. What is the dog doing now? And I'm also going to peel some of them, ones that have better peel, and dehydrate the peel and then preserve that. and also juice them and freeze the juice, which is partially why I'm super excited to now have a bigger freezer. This was one of those days where my timing just wasn't right, and all the amazing things I had planned to do just didn't happen because I'd taken Rafa to the beach in the morning and I just ran out of time and out of daylight and out of decent light in the kitchen. So I started with making some of the fresh food that I was planning to eat over the next few days while I focused on cooking up a month's worth of food in between appointments that I had. I started making a potato salad. I don't get them very often and I love them. And I started chopping up all the herbs to get the roast chicken in the oven for dinner. The only herbs I had on this occasion were parsley, rosemary, and a little bit of thyme. So I chopped them up and got them ready for the chicken. I had parboiled some of the potatoes, and so I fluffed them up and popped them in a roasting pan along with some garlic to make my roast potatoes nice and garlicky. I really, really love garlic. So in all of my recipes, I'm really heavy on the garlic. So maybe if you try any of these recipes at home, you'll have to adjust for your taste. But generally, when I make roast potatoes, I put in as many garlic bulbs as I have, and towards the end, I'll pop in some fresh rosemary. The rest of the potatoes, I let them boil a bit longer for the potato salad, and I got started on the carrots and the sweet potatoes for the roast. One of the things I really like about this roast chicken recipe is that you boil a lemon for a few minutes and then you pierce it and pop it inside the chicken, and it helps cook the chicken from the inside, and it also brings that lovely lemon taste in. Jamie Oliver recommends slitting the thighs like this just so that the meat on the leg cooks more evenly. I then really carefully try and separate the skin from the chicken so that I essentially have a little pocket there, and I'm going to stuff the sticks of butter in there and as many of the herbs as I can jam in there. With any of the leftover herbs or the ones that are just attached to my hand, I am actually going to spread them all around the chicken to get the flavors everywhere. But this is kind of like a really cool way to make sure the seasoning and the flavors of your herbs get into the chicken. So you season the herbs with salt and pepper and mix it together with some olive oil, and then you start getting it ready to put inside the chicken. And I actually think I needed a bit more seasoning this time, but it still tasted really, really nice, and it's a really easy recipe. And you just push it and the butter as far in underneath the skin as you can, and you try as very best as you can to not tear the skin. Not only does this method maximize your flavor into your chicken and make sure the all-important butter gets right in there, but it also helps crisp up the skin when you're roasting it. And it helps create a tasty gravy. Halve 1 to 2 red onions and pop them in the baking dish along with some garlic, and just shove that garlic in and around underneath the chicken. I put some in the cavity as well just to make sure that I got nice garlic flavor everywhere. Then you're going to take that hot lemon, stab it in a few places and it should hiss a little bit, and then you're going to very carefully push it up the inside of your chicken. Now, ideally, you remember to put some herbs in there first. I didn't, so I just started shoving them in as much as I could after the event, and it was quite a tight cavity, so I didn't get as much as I would like there, but you just do your best and get as much in there for flavor as you can. Once my chicken was ready and the oven was warmed to 180 degrees, which is about 400 Fahrenheit, I popped my chicken in and waited a really long time for it to cook. While I was waiting what I thought would be 2 hours out for the chicken to cook, I got some bacon bits cooking in the fry pan and tried to get them nice and crispy for my potato salad. I really like crunchy potato salad, so I try to only make it when I have celery on hand. But if I don't have it, I'll make it anyway. I know a lot of other people put other things like nuts or chives or whatever else in their potato salad, but we're in winter, so I only had what I had in the garden and in the freezer. So once the bacon was done, then I rested it in a bowl with a paper towel for a little while just to get all the oil off. I generally wait for my bacon to cool down before adding it to the potato and adding the mayonnaise and the sour cream, unless I'm feeling really impatient, but because this is for tomorrow's lunch, it could sit there while I get tomorrow's breakfast ready. When I make chia, I make a few days worth in one go. I use a 1-to-3 ratio. I find that's the best for avoiding either too runny or too gluggy chia. So whatever I measure out, it's 1 of chia and 3 of milk. Usually I'll use an almond milk, but I didn't actually have almond milk because I'd been getting ready to do some baking. I had full cream cow's milk, so that's what I used. It just makes it a bit creamier, but I try to avoid milk if I don't have to have it or if I'm not using it for something else. But on this occasion, that's what we used. Then I add a bit of honey for some sweetness and a bit of vanilla essence, and I usually just eyeball it, and I've got kind of used to a fairly mild taste on the chia, and then I just add berries or various other things at the time of serving to make it more interesting and palatable. But I find this is a really nice way to keep my tummy full for longer. But I'm not a big breakfast person, so this honestly usually ends up being eaten for lunch. I know a lot of people who mix their chia up in jars and they just put it all in there, give it a quick shake up and pop it in the fridge. I can't do that. I hate it when there are clumps in the chia, and so as I keep cooking, I will actually continue to stir this until I've got rid of all the lumps, and then I'll pop it in the fridge. When I construct the potato salad, I like to do predominantly mayonnaise with a good big fat blob tablespoon of sour cream. I find that gives it the best taste. Depending on how much potato salad I'm making, I will just keep adding until I get the right amount of coverage on my potatoes. And I feel like this is a really like a personal preference thing. On this occasion, I didn't end up putting quite enough mayo on it, but it was fine the next day. Basically, by the time I decided it didn't have enough mayo on it, I couldn't be bothered to do more dishwashing and add more. So this was my lazy man's version of a potato salad, but oh my god, I love potato salad. It's the best. I just don't eat it very often. In my impatience waiting for dinner, I probably ended up taking my chicken out of the oven about 3 times to pour the juices that were coming out of it all over the skin again to try and redistribute the flavors and to make sure that the chicken didn't dry out. Taking the chicken out so many times probably had something to do with the reason it took so long to cook. Approximately 200 hours later, after I'd checked the temperature on the chicken another 2,000 times, I eventually took the chicken out and used a torch to check and see if the meat was cooked all the way through. And finally, hallelujah, it was, and it was time to plate it up and get my dinner ready at 9:30 p.m. But first you've got to cover the chicken and let it rest for about 15 minutes, which gives you enough time to make a gravy. So I just leave everything in the pan and I add a little bit of gluten-free corn flour and I mix it in to kind of thicken up the gravy. And then you bring it to a boil and start mashing everything together and try and get as much juice and flavor out of everything as you possibly can. And you either cook it until it's a consistency that you like for gravy or until you get bored like I did. Luckily, it was also at a consistency I liked. And then it was time to pop it on the chicken that I'd waited all day for after I strained it all out and got as much of the juice out of the gravy as I could. This chicken has quite a strong lemon taste to it, but it also has those beautiful herbs all the way through.
and with the gravy and the roast potatoes, it's just amazing. But by the time I actually ate, it was nearly 10 o'clock, and I still had to package those leftovers up so that I could freeze them the next day. The only thing left to do was to bag up the already chopped up cauliflower and to wash it again and pop it in the fridge for tomorrow, when I was going to start the next part of this mass cook-off to try and get a month's worth of meals done and ready and in the freezer. So this cauliflower pilaf is going to have to wait till our next video, and thank you so much for spending the time with me today. I really appreciate it. Hope you've enjoyed this video, and we'll see you for cauliflower pilaf and a few other things in the next video. Bye. You want to try some cauliflower? Bye.